In a moment, we're going to talk about music licensing, and also the review process for your film and getting feedback. But before we get into that, I'm going to give you 5 tips for editing your film. One of the most important things to editing your film, in addition to any creative choices you make, is actually more about organizing. You need to keep all of that footage organized. It's a ton of footage. You might be dealing with 10, 20, 30, 40 hours of footage, thousands of individual clips. And if you're not structured and organized and disciplined in how you organize those files and what type of system you use, then it can be a mess, because you're going to want to go back, reference previous takes. You're going to continue to iterate during the process and do various versions. And so having all of that footage structured is incredibly important. So I want you to use this structure for organizing your footage. You're going to want to create bins or folders within your project. You're going to organize all of your footage, all of your files into those folders, into those bins based on scene number. And use the scene number instead of labeling them with scene 1, and it's spelling out scene and the number 1. Use 3 digits, because you're probably not going to have 1,000 scenes, but you might have 100 or more scenes. So you label those scenes scene 001 using those 3 digits, scene 002, 003, and so on until you get to 100. And that way, as you're keeping those bins organized, they're going to flow in alphabetical order and numerical order. And that's going to make it easier for you to find what you need. So in each of those folders labeled by scene, you'll have a folder for the video files, a folder for the audio files, and then a folder or bin for the sequences. So you have the video, audio, and sequences. You apply appropriately video files and video, audio and audio, and then you're going to create your timeline sequences with the synced clips. All of that, keeping that together per scene, having that all organized, that's going to be super helpful for you. And then as you create those sequences and timelines, you'll do one that's just the footage synced for that scene. Have all of that on one sequence and then duplicate it. And then the next is the first sequence that you're actually starting to edit and manipulate the footage into the scene that you're trying to build. So you're going to duplicate the first sequence and then start doing your editing on that. Now, once you make some progress and you get kind of a first pass, everything's kind of roughed in, like what we would call an assembly, the shots in the order that you would want, or at least the first attempt of that, save that one and duplicate that. And each time you make a series of big edits, duplicate the sequence, because you never know when you're going to want to go back and reference a previous edit. And that might seem overboard to you or redundant or unnecessary, but I'm telling you, it's going to be very important for you to do that. At some point in time, you're going to want to go back, reference something, and if you didn't structure things that way, you're really going to regret it. So keep that structure. You also might face the temptation to want to just go in and you're excited and start editing your film and throwing some shots together before you sync the audio to the video. Do not do that. You're going to create major headaches and problems for yourself later on. First, be disciplined enough to go through and sync all of your audio and video. And at the very least, at least do it scene by scene or day by day. So when you jump in, once you have all your footage dumped into your various folders per scene, then you start scene 1. Even if you don't want to go through and sync all 100 scenes before you get started on scene 1, go ahead and sync for the day that you're working on. So maybe you're going to work on scene 1 through 3 on your first day. Then go ahead and sync at least the audio and video for scene 1, 2, and 3. Once you get past that, you can take a break from the editing process, get back into syncing, and do it that way. And that way, if it's overwhelming to you to sync everything all at once, you do it in the order that you're going to work on it. But again, I highly recommend syncing all of it as much as possible before you dive in. And this might be an opportunity for somebody who's an aspiring editor. They have just a little bit of experience. They want to know more. They want to get into film editing maybe, and they have it. They've edited other types of projects, other types of videos, but they've never edited film. You could actually have somebody work as an assistant editor for you. And during the times that you're not working on the project, they can be syncing that footage and prepping the files for you. Or if you use your duplicate drive and they have access to their own computer and editing station and software, then you can just be passing that file back and forth, and they can be syncing those timelines for you. That's an approach we've used with some of our films in the past. Again, there's somebody who's an aspiring filmmaker or an aspiring editor, and they're looking for an opportunity. And so you can say, okay, here's how you get started. I'm showing you how I'm structuring all of the files and the folders and the bins and sequences, and you work ahead of me. So I'm gonna go ahead and sync the first 10 scenes and start editing that. And while I'm editing scenes 1 through 10, you can gradually start to sync all the other footage ahead of time before I get to it. And that's a great opportunity for somebody, and that's an approach that we've used in the past. It's been really successful, and the folks who have had the opportunity to work on it are really grateful for that experience. And along the same lines with how you're organizing and structuring your project and your footage, I want to encourage you to create a new project file each day, so that once you're wrapped for the day on your editing session, you save everything over and over and over, save. But at the end of the day, you're going to save, make sure everything's saved. And then the next day when you start your edits, start a new project file with that day's date. And again, as you iterate, as you make changes, you're going to keep those copies, and you can always go back to a previous copy. So you're going to regularly create new sequences each time you make a significant amount of changes. And then each day you'll make a new project file. Just in case something weird happens with your project file or it gets corrupted, you're going to have backups of that. And then I encourage you also to keep the auto save option, keep that enabled on your project, so that your computer's auto saving your project file often as well. So save often, create new sequences often, and create new project files often, probably even daily. So that's the approach to organizing. Now, next is tip number 2, and this is all about utilizing the notes that you made while you were shooting. Hopefully, while you're shooting your feature film, either you or somebody else that's a part of your team will be taking notes about each take and each scene, so that you can refer back to those when you're editing. There's so much going on in the production process that it's easy to forget things or forget the reason why you made a change that was somewhat different from the script or the screenplay, or why you picked up a certain shot or added a movement, or if there was something that you accidentally revealed in a take that you want to avoid using that take in post. You're gonna wanna make those notes in production so that when you get into post, you have those notes. You can sit down with those, and as you're evaluating a scene, you can look at the notes that you had from that scene, and it's gonna remind you of those little nuances, things that if you don't bring the notes with you, you may forget, and it may not be obvious in the scene, and then later on down the road, you'll realize why you didn't want to use that particular take or shot or that line of dialogue, and then you're gonna regret it. This is something that we do often, whether it's a feature film or client work or commercials that we're working on, is if we write down a note and we don't reference that when we're editing, the same thing happens to us. We forget there's so much going on in our lives, so much going on with various projects that we have and that were happening that day. And we might forget that, you know what, we realized that the way somebody used a particular tool or instrument in a scene was the wrong way, and somebody then corrected it, or we were revealing a logo that we didn't mean to reveal in that particular take. And if you don't have that written down and you don't refer to that while you're editing, then you're gonna have the mistake of leaving it in and then later on regretting it or having to go back and replace it, and it creates this whole domino effect. So make sure you take notes during production, then utilize those notes during post. The third tip, I'm just gonna remind you, you're gonna hear me harping on audio all the time. It's so important. And again, just a reminder, don't skip out on the process of syncing the audio. You need to sync all of that and get it in order. And like I said, you might be able to leverage a relationship of an assistant editor and have them involved in the film, and they can be syncing ahead of you if you're not able to do it yourself. The fourth tip, a little bit of philosophy for you on this one. It's a huge undertaking. You have thousands of clips and takes that you're trying to edit together. It can be really overwhelming, and you're gonna wanna take a step back. And as the advice often goes, the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And that's what you're gonna do with the feature film. You're gonna take it a scene at a time, a day at a time. Don't get overwhelmed with everything else that might be going on with the film, other problems that you think you might have with the film that you want to jump into. Just do it a scene at a time. Get a scene to a place where you think it's serviceable, not even amazing, just serviceable. Get it to that point, and then take a breath, and then you can move on to the next one. And let your subconscious start to do the work of massaging any sort of problems or concerns that you might have. And then when you're ready, you can go back to a scene that you at least got to a serviceable level. And then you're gonna have an aha moment of a way that can address it or fix it in a way that elevates the quality of that scene. But just take it one scene at a time, gradually putting one foot in front of the other as you build out your 100+ scene film or whatever it is. And eventually you're gonna realize that you've strung together an actual feature film, and it starts to get really exciting. And the 5th tip is to consider that you're actually gonna make 3 movies. And what I mean by that is it's going to be one final product, one feature film, but it's often said you make 3 films in the process of making one: the one you write, the one you shoot, and the one you edit. So as you approach the post-production phase, realize that you had this dream in the beginning, you had the story in mind and the screenplay that you wrote, and that screenplay is one kind of identity on its own. And the next one was in the production phase. When you were shooting, I'm sure you're gonna have to make adjustments that are a little bit different from the screenplay, and then that kind of becomes its own identity as well. There are things that you're not gonna be able to do that are on the paper, and you're gonna have to make adjustments. The same thing's gonna happen in post. When you get into post and it's time to edit your feature film, realize that it's gonna be a little bit different than what you thought you were shooting. You're gonna have to make some changes as well. And you're gonna continually look at what you have to accept what you have, receive that, and then say, okay, how can I enhance what is already here? And it's gonna be its own identity as well. So embrace that you're gonna make 3 films, and the last one is gonna be the one that you make in post. And you're gonna have to realize there's some things that you can't do, but there are new things that you can do with what you have and make the best of it.